I'm Ainsley Greiner. I'm the Technology Conservator here at the National Museum of Australia.
My name is Ian Stewart. I actually started an apprenticeship with a company called Repco, Automotive Engineering.
Well, my name is Ken, and I'm a member of a team of 3 older guys who work at the large technology workshop in the museum's area.
My name is David Hallam, and I'm a technological conservator. I started in conservation as a volunteer at WA Museum working on maritime objects in the early 70s. And then from there on I went and did chemistry, majoring in corrosion science.
It gave me a great insight to the machining and so forth of automotive parts. Repco was a very innovative company. They actually made all their own machines to carry out the necessary work on automotive engineering at that time.
I was first introduced to conservation sort of on the back of a degree in archaeology. I saw it as being an opportunity to focus some of the things that I'd learned at uni, and I really liked the applied nature of it. I was able to incorporate something that I could develop my academic skills, but I could also develop my hand skills and do practical work.
My job is it's the maintenance of the automotive fleet, the cars, the old cars, stuff like that.
My job sort of comprises a number of things. Basically there's a lot of analytical work, scientific work looking at analysis of some of the fluids that we use in technology items, doing some research, but also it's day-to-day conservation work in treating objects. So obviously you need good hand skills, but specifically more to technology items, I've also had to develop an understanding of engineering practice, things like fitting and machining, welding, hand workshop skills, basically.
Large technological objects can either be conserved as functional objects or as artefacts. As functional objects, you can see how the object worked, and you can see a lot about the history of the technology involved.
Keeping the fleet operating, running, because that's what motor cars are. As something that doesn't work, they're just an inanimate object, whereas motor cars were meant to operate and work, and our motor cars, they do that, and they start up and we drive them around, and they're just great things.
Currently I'm leading a team treating the Royal Daimler, Queen Elizabeth's Royal Daimler from 1954.
My name's Laura Breen, and I'm a curator at the National Museum of Australia. My connection with the Daimler goes all the way back to 2009 when we first acquired the car for the National Historical Collection.
The Daimler project, I became involved with that through the large technology side of the museum.
The Daimler's history goes back way before the 1954 Royal Tour. It actually dates from 1948, and it was intended for the 1949 Royal Tour of Australia by King George VI. Now this tour actually didn't go ahead. At the very last minute it was cancelled due to the King's ill health. So the Daimler company had already completed the cars. They were actually sitting waiting on the docks ready to be shipped out to Australia. In the months after the Royal Tour, the Governor of South Australia, Sir Robert George, contacted the Royal Visit Car Company and asked if he could purchase one of the cars which he had seen in Adelaide at the time. He used it during the opening of the State Parliament in Adelaide in 1957 and used it again in 1960 for his farewell tour. We start to lose track of the car in the historical record because it passed into private hands. We do know, however, that it was owned by 2 private collectors in the South Australian area who owned it right up until the museum purchased it in 2009.
It did look magnificent, I've got to say. It's the first time I'd actually seen one in the live. But on closer examination, the car was in a quite poor condition. I believe that the vehicle had been stored outside for a big period of its time. It had had a mechanical defect, which the vehicle was not able to be driven. The shed that I think the vehicle was stored in was an open shed. I think it only had a roof, which enabled, I guess, the weather to get at the exterior and the interior of the car. The nice part about the Daimler though was that it's intact. Basically everything is there. I believe that there's a lot of the parts that once again are original, very much so, which could be quite easily revamped and make the car as beautiful it was, I guess, back in 1954.
This Daimler was actually one of 4 different cars which were used at various points in the 1954 Royal Tour of Australia. So there were 4 cars of 3 different types, 2 of which were a landaulet type with a hood that folded back so the Queen could be easily seen by the crowds who journeyed to view her during the royal progress. The second type was a closed-top car, which the Queen would have used during rainy weather. And the third type was an open car, which the Queen would also have used during the royal progress.
One of the things that is significant about the Daimler motor car was its ability to process at slow speeds of 5 miles an hour. There's a fair bit of debate in the group working on the Daimler as to whether this was actually a contributing factor in the later mechanical damage that the engine sustained.
Certainly some of the features on the Royal Daimler are state-of-the-art and quite forward-thinking for their time, but other features are actually quite old-fashioned. Certainly the car's engine and aspects like its crankshaft design and its differential are certainly quite old-fashioned and really representative of the state of British engineering at the time.
When the museum decided to pick the vehicle up, we had to look at the feasibility of getting the vehicle all the way from Adelaide, and also we had to look at getting the vehicle on the actual truck, which the tilt tray version of the truck is very good because it has the vehicle was winched on. It could not be driven. It did come over in an enclosed truck, but also in saying that we had to look at the interior and the exterior parts of the car, such as taping of the headlights so the glasses didn't shatter, removing anything that could fall off on the trip from Adelaide to Canberra, and basically, I guess, wrapping it up in cotton wool. So it came as a complete unit.
Currently, we're going through a process of doing a physical examination of the vehicle, which will involve taking the coachwork or the bodywork off the chassis and then doing a full mechanical survey of the chassis and engine and driveline and components.
It's a real challenge for us. We've got to get to a stage where we can actually pull it apart and assess it and how much we're going to have to do to it mechanically. But the big challenge we're finding, and it will be ongoing for us, is that when the body was built, the people who build the body attach it to the chassis and it's all bolted down, and then a group of people come along and then they're like cabinet makers and upholsterers, and they go inside the vehicle and they build their whatever it is they're doing, such as the driver's seat, for instance, and that's been built in such a way that it covers over all the attaching bolts and so on that originally fastened the car to the chassis. Of course, they would never dream that this car would ever have to be separated from its chassis, and they didn't make it in such a way that we could get at the bolts. So we've actually had to invent a way of getting at them without destroying anything, and that's pretty hard work.
What we hope to do is to represent the vehicle in its original 1954 form. We want to give it a real stateliness. So in order to do that, we aim to have it functioning again. It will involve extensive work on the mechanicals. We'd like to hear the engine make it purr, like a straight 8 should. We also want to, retain as much of the original coach work as possible to give the original impression of what it should be.
The mechanical side of it is going to be a major issue. Unfortunately, the investigations we have done so far on all the mechanics is actually the whole braking system is completely rusted up and seized and so forth. The major other drama that the vehicle has that the engine has a broken crankshaft, which will mean that the engine will have to be completely redone. And I feel that I'm, the knowledge that I have, that we will be able to attend to those things very, very well. The reason that the crankshaft is broken on the vehicle is because of its design. So we would have to look at doing a slightly different design internally on the crankshaft so this doesn't happen again. In saying all that, I believe that the Daimler could be brought back to its original glory.
With the Daimler, to separate the body from the chassis, my function at this stage has been to disconnect everything that joins the chassis to the body, such as the electrics, the fuel system, all the heater pipes, the air conditioning type system that was in the car, so that when the body comes off with whatever it is we use to do that, we want it to come away cleanly and not be still joined by some small piece of wiring or something that we may destroy, and we don't need to do that. We've got to be sure that when we go to put it back together again, everything still fits and it all goes back as it should do.
So whilst we were, pulling apart various components from the vehicle, like namely the driver's seat and some of the bodywork in the rear of the vehicle, we found various bones of all sorts of different animals, I suspect, including rats.
The bodywork of the vehicle will need a lot of attention. Funnily enough, the vehicle has a lot of aluminium panels on it, which in a way we can, in our own workshop with the equipment and so forth that we have access to, we will be able to repair a lot of that ourselves, So, and anything that can't be actually acquired from the Daimler people, then we would be able to make it back, back to a working, I believe a very efficient and working vehicle.
The Daimler certainly is a very impressive vehicle. It's close to 6 metres in length. It had a straight 8, 5.5 litre engine. It has a body that was built by Hooper & Co in London, so it was built by professional coach builders. It's not a modern car, it's not something that has a monocoque chassis. So there's a lot of craftsmanship in this vehicle, which makes it a particularly interesting project to be working on. It's heavy, it's big, it has a real presence to it. It would have been, a beast of a thing, a real stately vehicle that would have had a growl, a little rumble as it rolled down the street. It would have been quite something to see.
Working at the museum has actually given me a passion in a way that where I've had the opportunity to use my, I believe, the hand skills that I've learnt in 45 years. And I feel very privileged actually to be able to work on, what you would call iconic items at the museum to keep them in a functioning operation, or that people down the track can see for many years to come.
Every day I have people that I know in my industry who would take my job away. I do it because I love it. I do it because I've got something to give. I've been in the industry for just over 60 years, and I've got knowledge about old vehicles that probably only one of my two colleagues has got.
In modern day society, components from cars are replaced and not fixed. So what we're finding is that we have to draw from skills from a previous time.
Cars with ignition systems that haven't been around for 30 years or more. And you know, I know about those things. So for me, this is just what I love to do and what I need to do.
What I really enjoy about my job is that on a day-to-day basis I work with a vast variety of different things, different objects, different materials. I'm fortunate enough to work on objects that evoke fantastic Australian stories. I'm also privileged to be able to use, you know, both my analytical mind and my hands. And I've learnt a vast amount of knowledge and skills from our engineering staff.